Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Federal Conservative leader Erin O'Toole has a bone to pick with the Liberals. Actually, 3 of them. We will explain what they are. We hear from energy policy analyst David Yeager about how devastating the cancellation of the Keystone XL pipeline expansion is for workers in both Canada and the United States. And a special event to raise funds and awareness of homelessness in our region will be taking place next month. We have details about how you can get involved.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The federal Conservatives are set to launch a 3-pronged attack on the government as Parliament is set to resume. Leader Erin O'Toole is against former Governor General Julie Payette getting any of the usual perks after she resigned under a cloud of harassment allegations last week. That would include a pension of over $140,000. O'Toole says he has a lot of questions about Payette's departure and the search for her replacement.
We should ask the Prime Minister if he assured the outgoing Governor General that she would receive the regular courtesies extended to Governor Generals in the past. It's not appropriate in a case where there's a break in the assignment of the Governor General. But we do know the Prime Minister and his ministers met with her, and did he provide those assurances? That's a question for him. But absolutely, this is a small constitutional crisis caused by Mr. Trudeau's PMO. He must consult the other parties to show Canadians that there's an assurance that there's no politicization of this important role.
Tory leader Erin O'Toole also says the interruption of deliveries of COVID-19 vaccines from Pfizer is a problem that promises of make-up deliveries later in the winter does not solve. He says he wants tens of thousands more Canadians vaccinated by the end of February.
Conservatives want the government to succeed. Our nation depends on it. The ability for our country to rebuild our economy, to get Canadians back to work in every sector and in every region, depends on a smooth vaccine rollout. Instead of talking about their portfolio of vaccines, that the Liberal government has options to receive over the next 2 years, Canadians need to see tens of thousands of vaccines roll out in the next 2 weeks. Between now and the middle of February, Canada was scheduled to receive almost 1 million vaccines. Instead, we will be receiving approximately 8% of that projection.
O'Toole says he also plans to pepper the Trudeau Liberals on the cancellation of the Keystone XL pipeline expansion. The Buy American executive order that U.S. President Joe Biden signed today canceled permits for the Keystone XL pipeline expansion. Biden's Buy American plan is designed to funnel government spending to U.S. workers and companies. It includes a crackdown on waivers like the hard-won exceptions Canada secured under the Obama administration more than a decade ago. Energy policy analyst David Yeager says it's not just tens of thousands of union jobs lost for Canadians and Americans with the cancellation of the Keystone XL pipeline expansion. He says when it comes to the economy and dealing with climate, this cancellation makes no sense.
God, when you're doing God's work on climate change and the environment, little things like the peons that would have worked in the building the pipeline, or the fact that they'll still require heavy oil from Venezuela or Mexico or some other source that'll come in by tanker. These are secondary to the greater goal. No, it makes no sense economically. It makes no sense in terms of climate. It makes no sense anywhere except the politics of climate change. And again, that's why I said, what have we really lost? Well, it was a symbol. It's not just a pipeline. It's not just about oil.
Catch the full interview with energy policy analyst David Yeager and Jeanette Rocher coming up after Business News. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland says Ottawa is looking at stricter requirements for the border and travelers to combat the spread of COVID-19.
The 14-day obligatory quarantine is a really important, really tough measure, and I am glad that it is there, and I am glad it has been in place for months. And I want to remind Canadians that this is a legal obligation of everyone entering the country. The same is true for the requirement to have a negative test before getting on a plane and coming into Canada. And people who do not have that test done will not be allowed to come back. As for additional border measures, those are actively being considered and, actively being considered within the government. We are working in collaboration with provinces and territories as we have since the beginning of this pandemic. And it's absolutely the right thing for us to be actively considering tougher measures.
The Alberta government announced today that Alberta farmers will be receiving a 20% reduction in crop insurance premiums this year. The reduction from Alberta's government and Agriculture Services Corporation will save farmers more than $55 million on their crop insurance premiums in 2021. Alberta Agriculture Minister Devin Tereshan says the reduction will help farmers compete more internationally. It will also directly support job creators and boost the rural economy. A farm with 2,000 acres will save around $8,000 this year alone. The largest single-phase wind project in the country is being proposed in southern Alberta. The $500 million venture would bring 300 construction jobs and 15 long-term positions to Lomond, Alberta. The investment would come from German-owned ABO Wind and features 83 new wind turbines for the Buffalo Plains Wind Farm. The project would have the capacity of nearly 516 watts of electricity and power around 160,000 homes. The project is currently under review by the Alberta Utilities Commission. Bow Island RCMP have found a man they've been looking for since he was first reported missing on November the 11th. Police say the body of 51-year-old Mark Jensen was discovered near his home in Foremost on January 22nd. Officials say the death is not considered suspicious and an autopsy has been ordered. The coldest night of the year put on by Streets Alive mission will look a little bit different this year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. There will be a walk outside on February 20th, and people can walk virtually until February the 28th. Each year, the event raises money for organizations in our city that help out the less fortunate. Jennifer Lepko is the Director of Fund Development for Streets Alive, and she says the donations are lower this year compared to previous years.
With that understanding that, it's hard for people this year to book too much beyond, the next day. We're hoping to raise $24,000, which is a little bit lower than our previous goals have been. But we recognize that, there's a lot of places that are in need, and we want to make sure that we have a reasonable goal. Again, every dollar counts, and the more we can raise, the better. We'd love to surpass our goal. We just hope that everybody is eager to get involved.
To register or to donate, you can visit the Coldest Night of the Year's website. In addition to those who are homeless, newcomers to Canada find themselves in very vulnerable situations, often arriving in our city with only the clothes on their backs. My City Care puts on mobile and in-house events to help many of the refugee families who are in need of items like bedding, sleeping bags, and towels.
One of the things that we usually do in the springtime is we take our mobile units out to the schools. And surprisingly enough, last year, just by happenstance, we brought some towels with us that were donated, and they all flew off the tables. And we were really surprised by that because we're like, what kids and stuff like that want towels? And we started to kind of connect with some of the kids and found out a lot of them were coming from, they were newcomers to Canada. And even some of them had said that that was the first towel they've ever actually owned. That was their own towel. So ever since last spring, we kind of started collecting those items, but we've just been a lot more intentional in this season of making sure that we have those well stocked.
You can drop off donations at the My City Care downtown location, which is located in the basement of the 5th and 5th Youth Services building on the corner of 5th Street and 5th Avenue South. Perhaps you've been dreaming about making your way to another country and getting away from all of our cold winter weather. Unfortunately, that's not an option right now for many of us due to ongoing COVID-19 restrictions. Inspired Vacations in Lethbridge is working very hard to provide their clients with a taste of the countries they like to visit. As Micah Quinn explains now, this week you can enjoy the flavor of Nepal.
Imagine booking a staycation from the comfort of your own home. That's what Inspired Vacations is doing for clients who are missing the travel and taste of different countries.
This kind of came to be because I was chatting with a friend, Jamie Bootsma from Bootsma Bakery, and she said, what about a vacation in a box? And you could deliver that, and then people could actually have something to look forward to because we aren't able to travel to a lot of places. And in fact, I think it's going to be more difficult in the coming weeks with what the government's going to put out. And so we kind of just started brainstorming on that, as well as trying to see what kind of other local businesses we could support at the same time.
The first staycation featured Greece, And on January 29th, consumers can travel to Nepal from their home, where the Water Tower Grill will provide food.
And it's going to have, like, just for a sample taster for people, I guess, if they're curious, is it's got like a pork dumpling. It's the momo. Main dinner is going to be a gurkha chicken. I believe there's a chutney and a saffron rice with that, but it should be able to bring everything together, and some drinks as well. So
Hamilton says that a Lethbridge resident will be sharing a video of him climbing Mount Everest during the night.
As we're doing the research for these different evenings, what we're finding is we have some really talented people in town who've done some amazing things. So we reached out for our Nepal evening, and there are actually a number of people in town who have climbed Everest, and one of them is going to be sharing his story.
The staycations are planned until March, and for more information on the virtual travel, you can visit the Inspired Vacations website. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Today is Robbie Burns Day, a day that many of Scottish heritage celebrate the life and works of Scottish poet Robert Burns with the traditional Burns dinner. Scottish culture and identity have played a role in many of our lives, including this song Auld Lang Syne, or referencing the best laid schemes of mice and men. Leela Sharon Ahir, Minister of Culture Multiculturalism, had this to say in a release earlier. Alberta's Scottish heritage has been long part of our history, from our first premier to our provincial tartan, and it will continue to be an important part of our culture. 3 upcoming consumer trade shows in Lethbridge have been rescheduled to comply with the current COVID-19 restrictions implemented by the province. The 3 events include the Southern Alberta RV Expo, the Ag Expo and Seed Fair, along with the Home and Garden Show, have all been delayed for 3 weeks. Mike Warkentin with Exhibition Park says they must adhere to strict physical distancing rules and on-site health screening of all guests and vendors during the 3 events. Both schools of the Lethbridge School Division have a confirmed case of COVID-19. Coalbanks Elementary School and Senator Joyce Fairburn Middle School each have 1 reported infection. The Lethbridge School Division cannot confirm if the cases are staff members or students. Contact tracing and mandatory cleaning is in place, and classes resume to their original schedules on Monday. The province announced today that it is being cautious about lifting the current COVID-19 restrictions due to a couple of new variants of the virus which are being discovered around the world. Alberta Health Minister Tyler Shandro says things are looking up, however, as our active case counts are coming down.
These new variants present a serious threat and a complicating factor when it comes to relaxing restrictions. We need to continue to proceed cautiously, recognizing that our health system is still under significant strain. If we're not careful, our healthcare system could be in a dire situation within weeks, and it would be very difficult to get things under control.
The province says over the last 24 hours, there have been 362 new COVID-19 cases in Alberta. There are 9,337 active cases in total, including 637 people in hospital and 113 in ICU. Here in the South Zone, there are 399 active cases, including 129 in Lethbridge and 30 in Medicine Hat. As for schools across the province, there are 259 on active COVID-19 alerts and 9 schools on outbreak notice. Much of Saskatchewan remains under an extreme cold warning, with temperatures dipping below -40 with a wind chill. Officials at Environment Canada say Saskatoon dropped to -35 Sunday morning, and the community of Southend in the northeast part of the province woke up to -43. The extreme cold will last until midweek in areas located north of the Yellowhead Highway. Weather in the southern part of the province moderated over the weekend. Some stores in Winnipeg had long lineups over the weekend as people got their first chance in months to shop in person. New provincial health orders came into effect Saturday, allowing retail stores to reopen at 25% capacity. Manitoba Chambers of Commerce President Chuck Davidson calls it a spike in sales as opposed to an upward trend. He encourages Manitobans to be patient and to continue following health protocols so COVID-19 case counts do not go up again. The Manitoba government says a rapid COVID-19 testing center is now taking appointments for all teachers and other school staff who work with students. The Fast Pass Center in Winnipeg promises same-day results. Eligible clients must either be symptomatic or live with someone who is or be identified as a close contact through an exposure at school. Manitoba reported 3 additional deaths of people with COVID-19 yesterday, along with 260 new cases of the virus. South of the border, police in Indianapolis say 5 people, including a pregnant woman, were shot to death inside of a home in the city. The killings were discovered after officers found a young male with gunshot wounds around 4 a.m. on the city's northeast side.
I myself am heartbroken for the lives that have been taken too soon, for the young life that's forever been changed, and for the life that never got a chance to start. For the neighborhood left to pick up the pieces in the wake of unprecedented violence, and for all of the family and friends that have been rocked by grief.
From what we know at the very early stages of this investigation, this does not appear to be a random act. This is a very active investigation. Detectives are still on scene, canvassing the area for witnesses or anyone with information.
Celebrities, friends, and fans have been paying tribute to Larry King. The legendary American broadcaster and renowned interviewer died over the weekend at the age of 87. We have more now in this report.
Stars, friends and fans have paid tribute to broadcasting giant Larry King, who died on Saturday aged 87. King, the suspenders-wearing everyman whose interviews with world leaders, movie stars and ordinary Joes helped define American conversation for half a century, died at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. No cause of death was given, but a spokesperson said on January the 4th that King had COVID-19 and had received supplemental oxygen. A long-time nationally syndicated radio presenter, King was also a nightly fixture on CNN from 1985 to 2010 as the host of Larry King Live. Over the course of his career, he conducted an estimated 50,000 on-air interviews with people from the Dalai Lama to Elizabeth Taylor, Bill Gates to Lady Gaga. Those honouring King on social media included Celine Dion, Viola Davis, Bill Clinton, Reese Witherspoon and 50 Cent, as well as numerous TV viewers who developed a bond with the down-to-earth presenter over the course of his illustrious career. CNN colleague Wolf Blitzer wrote that King was an amazing interviewer and a mentor to so many of us, while CNN Chief Domestic Affairs Correspondent Jim Acosta said he was a broadcasting legend who will be missed by so many. Sam Golding, Associated Press.
With a patient dying around every 6 minutes in Los Angeles County right now, Samaritan's Purse has opened an emergency field hospital in the parking lot of Antelope Valley Hospital. They're assisting doctors and nurses who are overwhelmed with COVID-19 patients. Samaritan's Purse member Shannon Wood explained how they're bringing hope to this community.
My name is Shannon Wood and we are currently in Lancaster, California in LA County. Setting up a field hospital is a lot of long hours, it's hard work. We have lots of staff, everybody's pitching in. There's lots of hands to be able to get the supplies in the tents, all of the logistical issues that we're working through. So the team that we have is a fantastic group of nurses, doctors, paramedics. They've got a great work ethic. They're super excited to be here. They're willing to do whatever it takes. Awesome teamwork. So this hospital is severely overwhelmed with COVID patients. There is a patient dying approximately every 6 minutes in LA County right now, and we're just here to relieve that burden so that the patients can have the best care possible and that we can help the nurses and staff over at this hospital as well, not to be so overwhelmed. We are super excited to be here to try to bring hope to this community, both to the medical staff and the patients by helping them in a physical way, but also to help them spiritually see the light again and have hope in this terrible pandemic that's happening.
Amazing to see the incredible work Samaritan's Purse continues to do on a day-to-day basis. Many parts of Canada have been seeing quite a bit of snow over the past week. Now, when you think of the white stuff, you usually don't think of California, but look what happened in Southern California over the weekend. Up to a foot of snow fell in Southern California's mountains as the first in a series of winter storms brought real winter weather after weeks of sporadic rain that did little to ease the drought they've been experiencing. The wintry weather is expected to make its way further north later this week. Not a lot of snow here in southwestern Alberta. We had some light flurries along with a bit of a cooler stretch, and the cooler temperatures will remain for most of the week. Full weather details are coming up. We had some light flurries in some parts of southwestern Alberta today and much cooler temperatures. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a full look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, the cooler temps will be sticking around a while in Lethbridge?
Yes, that is unfortunately the reality for us this week, Hal. Lots of minus temperatures, but still within that average range of what the average temperature should be for this time of year. Okay, so let's take a look at what's happening this week. On Tuesday, a mix of sun and cloud, high at -9. Wind chill, -23 in the morning and -16 in the afternoon. Wednesday and Thursday, a mix of sun and cloud and high of -11. Friday, sunny, high of -9. Saturday, a mix of sun and cloud and a high of -2. A high of +1 on Sunday with a mix of sun and cloud. And according to the almanac, the average high for this time of year, -2, the average low, -14. So we are keeping in that range, as I was saying. Our high temperature on this day was back in 2006. It was 16 degrees. Our chilliest day on record was on this day in 1943, and it was -39. Sun rose this morning at 8:13 a.m., and our sunset today right at 5:15 p.m. Looking at our highs for tomorrow across the country, starting over on the west coast, Victoria could see a chance of showers overnight, but should clear up by tomorrow, high of 6. Mainly cloudy in Vancouver, 60% chance of showers early in the morning, except a few wet flurries over in the higher terrain, clearing in the afternoon, high of 5 degrees. In Edmonton, 60% chance of flurries, high -15, high -11 in Calgary with flurries. Sunshine and frigid cold across the prairies tomorrow. Extreme cold warnings in effect in Saskatchewan. Saskatoon's high -25. Wind chill could feel more like -43 tomorrow morning. In Regina, high of -19, much colder with the wind chill, risk of frostbite. And in Winnipeg, sunshine, high of -25 with the wind chill though -43. Over in central Canada, Toronto, periods of snow and blowing snow beginning in the morning. 10 centimeters is expected in some areas, high of 1 degree. In Ottawa, periods of snow beginning in the afternoon and a high of -8. Montreal, high -9, increasing clouds in the afternoon. And over in the Maritimes, Fredericton, mainly sunny skies with a high of 1. Halifax, chance of flurries in the afternoon, a high of 2 degrees. In Charlottetown, up to 2 centimeters of snow is expected and a high of 1. In St. John's, Newfoundland, chance of flurries or freezing drizzle in the morning, then more flurries in the afternoon. Up to 5 centimeters is expected with a high of 0. And there you go. That's a look at our weather forecast.
Today's weather is brought to you by Supplements King in Red Deer and Lethbridge, Canada's workout and nutrition products retailer.
Drug maker Merck says it is giving up on 2 potential COVID-19 vaccines following poor results in early-stage studies. The company says instead it will focus on studying 2 possible treatments for the virus that have also yet to be approved by regulators. Merck says its potential vaccines were well tolerated by patients, but they generated an inferior immune system response compared with other vaccines. Vancouver-based Premier Brands Holdings and a group of First Nations have successfully completed their $1 billion acquisition of Clearwater Seafoods. Premium Brands announced in November that it was teaming up with Mi'kmaq bands from Nova Scotia and Newfoundland to buy Atlantic Canada's largest wild seafood company. Member 2 Chief Terry Paul says the deal represents the single largest investment in the seafood industry by any Indigenous group in the country. Paul says the deal will allow Mi'kmaq bands to hold the company's fishing licenses with an Indigenous-owned partnership. Rod Baker has resigned as president and CEO of Great Canadian Gaming Corporation. The move comes as the sale of the company to a fund affiliated with Apollo Global Management is expected to be finalized by the second quarter of this year. The company says Terrence Doyle, president of Strategic Growth and Chief Compliance Officer, has been named interim CEO. The gaming company is expected to be delisted from the Toronto Stock Exchange if regulatory and closing conditions of the deal fall through. Budweiser beer ads will be sitting out the Super Bowl this year. Anheuser-Busch says instead it will donate the money it would have spent to run ads to COVID-19 vaccination awareness. The beer giant still, however, has 4 minutes of advertising during the big game between Tom Brady and the Bucs and the defending champs Kansas City Chiefs. The ads will be for its other brands including Bud Light and Bud Light Seltzer Lemonade. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 60 points on the day to finish at 17,906. The Dow was down 36 points to 30,960. The S&P 500 was up 13 points to 3855, and the Nasdaq was up 92 points to 13,636. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 62 cents to 52.89 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 16 cents to $2.60. Gold was up 11 cents to $18.5605 US an ounce, and silver was up a cent to $25.35 US an ounce. Wheat is at $294 per metric ton, barley's at $298, canola's at $670, and corn is at $330 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 20 cents to $116.53. Feeder cattle were down 70 cents to $136.55, and lean hogs were up 70 cents to $70.63. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to $78.48 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, ABO Wind is proposing the largest single-phase wind project in the country right here in southern Alberta. The German company wants to install 83 wind turbines for the Buffalo Plains wind farm located near Lomond. If the $500 million project is approved by the Alberta Utilities Commission, officials say it would create around 300 construction jobs and around 15 long-term maintenance positions. So what does it mean for Canada's energy sector now that U.S. President Joe Biden pulled the plug on the Keystone XL pipeline expansion? Here are the thoughts of David Yeager, energy policy analyst, with an interview with Jeanette Roche in just a moment.
The Alberta energy industry was eagerly waiting for the Keystone XL pipeline to get finished since getting approval from U.S. President Trump, but newly elected President Joe Biden just put a stop to all of that. Today's guest is David Yeager, an energy policy analyst and author of a new book, From Miracle to Menace, Alberta, a Carbon Story. He joins me via Skype from Calgary this morning. David, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, no problem. Hopefully I can help.
Absolutely. So David, let's get right into it. U.S. President Joe Biden made a statement on day one of his presidency by nixing the permit for the Keystone XL pipeline. So we knew Biden would be doing things differently, but did this surprise you at all?
He said he was going to campaign on it. You have to understand, we're not talking about a pipeline. We're not actually talking about oil. We're talking about a symbol, what's become since the tar sands campaign began 12 years ago. It's actually a symbol of environmental success or environmental failure, if you will. So among the Green supporters that have, with a two-party system in the States, pretty well everybody that doesn't think oil is a good idea is congregated in the Democratic Party. So the absolute ultra-left of the political spectrum and the environmental movement is by default within the Democratic Party. And so for quite a number of years, this pipeline, a fairly short pipeline. We realize there are 3.2 million kilometers of pipelines all over the world. Like, how did this pipeline and this oil become the problem? But it has become a symbol for something other than that. And so Biden said during the campaign that if he was elected, he would cancel it. The fact that he chose to do it as one of his first orders of business on day one.
And to what degree will this impact the Alberta and the Canadian energy industry?
Well, to have a piece of pipe that we don't have canceled, it won't affect day-to-day continuing operations. That was fully booked by the shippers. The shippers, the best market for this heavier oil that we produce in Alberta is the Gulf of Mexico. This was the most cost-effective way of getting that oil to the Gulf of Mexico. This would have resulted in the highest net backs we're likely to get for the product, probably would have shrunk the differential between world prices and Canadian prices. So economically, it would have been quite useful. But in terms of waking up the next day, it had no difference. But it was attractive. It was fully committed by the shippers. It would have been great for the future of the province. But 2 days later, here we are. It won't be as good as it would have been otherwise, but we're not going out of the business.
I know there's a lot of people upset about it. Do we have any options? I know Alberta Premier Kenney is talking about possible litigation, but does that have any chance of success?
Suing the White House or the United States of America hasn't exactly brought them to their knees in the past. The number of times it's been tried, it's symbolic, and you would think there would be a good case. It was a duly approved permit by the last president, and they buried the pipe and they spent the money. So there's no question there is a legal case, but the damages that may or may not be awarded after the lawyers' fees are done will just be a fraction of the opportunity cost of not having the pipe at all. We do have options. Of course, we've always had options. But our problems have also been in Canada, remember. We tried to build the Energy East pipeline to move this oil to all the way to New Brunswick. And of course, at that time, we were told, we don't need that. We've got Keystone. And we tried to build a terminal in Kitimat. We tried to build the Northern Gateway pipeline and export the oil to Tidewater and Pacific. And of course, that was shut down by the Prime Minister. So I think what possibly makes the Keystone decision even worse is the Keystone was for these two pipelines that have been either canceled or delayed because of political obstruction within Canada. Keystone was going to be the pop valve. And so I think we can maybe we can restart the internal discussions about is it possible to build pipelines to anywhere in Canada under the current government and the current political system.
Yeah, well, that's just it, right? So in addition to Canada being impacted, this will also impact a lot of people in the US as well.
Look, when you're doing God's work on climate change and the environment, little things like the peons that would have worked in the building the pipeline, or the fact that they'll still require heavy oil from Venezuela or Mexico or some other source that'll come in by tanker. These are secondary to the greater goal. No, it makes no sense economically. It makes no sense in terms of climate. It makes no sense anywhere except the politics of climate change. And again, that's why I said, what have we really lost? Well, it was a symbol. It's not just a pipeline. It's not just about oil. It is a political symbol to the people that backed the Biden presidency and gave them what they wanted, and we'll figure out their details later. That's a horrid start to Canada-U.S. relations, in my view.
Yeah, it really is. Now, speaking south of the border, is it possible that any of the U.S. companies that are affected or the state governors could have some sort of influence on convincing Joe Biden otherwise?
Who knows? I mean, if there was a major global supply disruption, I mean, oil is a pretty bizarre commodity with forces from all over the planet. You know, if there was an outbreak of war in the Middle East and security supply became an issue, I mean, there are factors that could cause this to be revisited, but none that I know of at this particular moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, some do say that this is a great opportunity for the Prime Minister to push back and play a bit of hardball by cutting back oil exports to the U.S. So what would the pros and cons of that be?
It's not going to happen. I mean, there are trade tools. You know, the old saying about Canada and the U.S. is our relationship. It's like sleeping with next door to an elephant, right beside an elephant. If the elephant is just sleeping there, you're warm and cozy. If it rolls over, you'll either freeze to death or get crushed. And so the policy tools that Canada has, besides the historic relationship and the importance of the relationship, are pretty limited what we can do in terms of punishing them. So when I can see the Prime Minister looking at all the factors, including hydro exports out of Quebec, and looking at the whole thing and simply saying, well, you know, he claims to have tried, and c'est la vie.
Right. So like you're saying, our federal government doesn't really have a great track record of going to bat for Alberta's energy industry. Any guesses?
Not this one. I would say that. That's not this current federal government.
Yeah.
There's nothing. If you look at the history on the Canadian pipelines that were either buried. I mean, Energy East, they didn't actually cancel berries. They just made it very difficult to build it with continued changes to the application process. And of course, Northern Gateway, just in case they thought of dusting that baby off, they brought in the tanker ban. That even if you built the pipeline, they wouldn't be allowed to have tankers anyway. So there's a coffin they really nailed shut on that pipeline. And so, yeah, the messaging from Ottawa on pipelines leaving Alberta has hardly been supportive. They've preferred to make it a U.S. issue, and now the U.S. has done what it did. And we have a couple of other pipelines involved. One is the Enbridge Line 3 expansion, and the environmentalists in the States are already saying, well, what about this one? And then, of course, there's the issue with Enbridge Line 5, where the governor of Michigan has said, well, we'd like that one shut down as well. So in the great scheme of things, it may be that the path of least resistance is to make sure we can maintain what we have. Who knows where this is going to end? That's why it's such a complex issue and such a bad start to Canada-U.S. relationships. I mean, if you go back to Enbridge Line 5, the original pipeline went from Alberta to the Lakehead, Superior, Wisconsin, and then it went by tanker to Sarnia. And so there was really the cheapest way to get Alberta oil to Ontario was through the United States. When they put the pipeline in, the shortest distance, instead of going way up around the top of Lake Superior, was to go through the States. And so that was the sort of relationship we used to have with the United States, was the transporter transportation, cross-border transportation of oil and gas. I mean, in the past, if you go back to the to the original free trade agreement, we had a proportionality clause assuring the United States we'd never cut them off. There was another treaty passed in 1977, a cross-border treaty ensuring the free flow of oil and natural gas between the countries and cooperation. So exactly how many babies got tossed out with the bathwater on Wednesday remains to be seen. So there's some other issues here that hopefully won't make this regrettable situation worse.
Yeah, well, you'd mentioned that unusual situation with Line 5, and then you also mentioned the Line 3, which crosses the border in Illinois and then goes to the Gulf Coast. So is any of that going to work for Canada, or is Biden just going to shut it all down too?
They're both existing pipelines.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that conversation is being had. It was interesting that when they talked about Enbridge Line 5, all of a sudden Southern Ontario, and that, of course, that's how Quebec gets its oil,
right,
for the Montreal refineries and their propane. So it was sort of interesting. Well, we don't really hate all the pipelines, the ones that we need. So it's sort of interesting in a perverse way. It loops Central Canada into the pipeline issue, and hope again. It just common sense indicates Keystone. I put Keystone in a separate category. Enbridge Line 3 already exists. This is simply a replacement pipeline. It's been in courts in the States. I'm not saying necessarily this will happen. That's why when you first asked the question, I looked at Keystone XL as something other than just a pipeline. If it were just a pipeline, we wouldn't be having this conversation. It is a symbol of environmental stewardship in many ways, which is regrettable, but it was a long-standing campaign. A lot of blood was spilled. A lot of work was done to brand it as just more than just a piece of pipe. Hopefully, the other pipelines will be regarded as just pipelines, and we can just soldier on and keep going with what we have.
Mm-hmm. David, I want to get your take on this one. So Joe Biden has said that the Keystone XL is tar sands that we don't need, right? He's been quoted as saying that, and that it just creates more pollution. But realistically, aren't pipelines a far safer option than transporting oil by truck or by tanker?
Of course, or rail, yeah. The alternative, when the Keystone was canceled the first time, we invented crude by rail. And that got up to 400,000 barrels a day at one point, depending on market conditions. But again, that's not about, you're actually talking common sense. You're talking safety and transportation and the need for oil. And that's why I specifically describe this pipeline and its contents as something. It's not just oil, it's not just a pipeline. It's a symbol of something greater. And modern politics is increasingly about slogans and symbolism. It's what actually happens every day, as opposed to the public debate, are materially different.
Mm-hmm. So looking ahead into 2021, where do you think the Canadian energy industry will be 1 year from now?
We're in a period of recovery. The oil price, if you recall, after COVID, the COVID lockdowns began last March, oil actually went negative for a while. It had not only had a low value, but no value. And so the price of oil has stabilized at a much higher level than many people thought. And so the gas prices are way up. Actually, natural gas prices are considerably higher than they have been for the past 5 years. So in terms of producing what we have, we're still in the business. Operating costs to produce what we have are $45 billion a year. That's staying steady. There was an announcement last week from the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers that companies were going to increase their capital spending. That last year they took a year off, if you will, not knowing where the bottom was. A lot of maintenance spending and capital repair work and reserve replacement was deferred, not knowing where the basement was. So actually, all the numbers indicate already that 2021 is going to be a materially better year than it was in 2020. There's unless something awful happens, Enbridge Line 3 is supposed to come on stream either late this year or early next year. That will take about 350,000 barrels a day. That's a lot of oil that won't have to go by rail. It'll be much more economical to ship it that way. Trans Mountain soldiers on. LNG Canada is still building the LNG export terminal. That's supposed to come on sometime in 2023. So the as I've said many, many times, when it comes to oil and gas, rumors of our demise are greatly exaggerated. Where do we win every day? We win at the gas pump and the burner tip. I mean, people still buy the product. The idea that we're a sunset industry, if you look at the world statistics, is grossly oversold. And so the fundamentals behind oil and gas are still pretty strong. We're a lean, mean fighting machine after another year of cutbacks. So the great news, if some cash comes in the door, it'll be more profitable than it has been. It's been a great cost, great human toll in terms of jobs and companies. But last time I checked, we were the 5th largest oil and gas producing jurisdiction in the world. And that shall be the same case in a year, I'm sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your expertise, David. We really appreciate you having come on our show.
It's a little difficult to find a silver lining in this cloud, but we're still in the oil business, and we will be for many, many years to come. Thanks for asking.
Every person experiences unexpected hardships or overwhelming despair, which can leave you with more questions than answers. As we try to move through the trials, we struggle to make sense of our circumstances, where to find hope, and what our lives will be like afterwards. James Gall is going to try to help make sense of all of it here for us today. He's the founder of God Encounters Ministries and is an international best-selling author. We're going to talk about his book today titled, Tell Your Heart to Sing Again. And James joins us now from Music City, USA, Nashville, Tennessee. Welcome to BCN, James.
Hey, it's great to be with you. And I have a long, wonderful history with the Miracle Channel. And obviously, I love Canada from sea to shining sea.
That is awesome. Glad to see we have some support out there, especially south of the border. Now, tell me a bit about your book, Tell Your Heart to Sing Again. A great name for a book. Where did you find the inspiration?
Inspiration came from perspiration, okay? Because I went through 14 years of what many would refer to as a meltdown. So I went through 9 years myself of a battle 3 times of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma cancer. And then the middle of that, a 4-year overlap where my wife went through severe colon cancer and she passed away.
Oh, man. I'm so sorry to hear that. Wow.
Yeah, it was very difficult with having 4 kids. Both parents went through cancer. And then we were also internationally ministers and authors. And then I became a single parent, went through a financial just terrible, where I went over $300,000 in medical debt. And so after my wife passed, I got hit with cancer a 3rd time. And then I was left at 58 years old to have to rebuild my life from almost like square zero.
So James, was there a time when you felt like you couldn't go on?
More than one time. Yes. Yeah. Multiple times.
So where did you find the hope to push through it all?
There was multiple what I call defining moments. And there's critical junctures that hit us all. But I had stored up the Word of God within my heart and within my mind. That the Word became an anchor to my soul. But I also had to learn new skill sets. And in the full armor of God, one of the pieces is called the helmet of salvation. But 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 8 is a commentary on that, and it's called the helmet of hope of salvation. So I had to rediscover the message of hope as a lifestyle.
Now, you write that isolation, unforgiveness, or even turning to old, bad habits for comfort can create setbacks during traumatic times. How can we really prevent this from happening?
First of all, be aware of that. Because if you're not aware of these tricks of the enemy or just life patterns, then you can slip into them. But if you know this ahead of time, then you can to be forearmed is to be, prepared. So I formed an accountability team. That is key. I not only had my board of directors, I not only had my pastors, I set up a transition accountability team of 3 men that I submitted very personal things to help me walk in the light.
Now, you believe we can become vulnerable to spiritual darkness by way of burnout or even guilt. What are some examples of how these can sneak into our lives?
Yeah, that's really that is really true. See, now guilt, you have to define that because there's real guilt, there's false guilt, and there's exaggerated guilt. And the accuser of the brethren tries to come in and make you feel guilty of things that aren't even true, or make you feel heavier about something or condemned. We welcome the conviction of Holy Spirit, but we've got to learn the difference between true conviction and condemnation. And this is really important to learn the difference of these two elements. And so we want to walk and receive conviction, but we must learn to cast off the condemnation, because there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus.
Amen. James, is it normal to feel discouraged or even confused during the dark times in our lives? How can we move into a future of hope when we're simply overwhelmed with despair?
Again, you must give yourself grace and mercy. There is what's called the dark night of the soul. I was a student of church history. I had a background in social work and psychology and things of this nature. But I never thought that I would be one of those people, you see. I had a background in inner healing and deliverance and things of this nature. I was an international advisor and consultant to major inner healing and ministries. So I didn't think that but you would be one of these that would be hit in this manner. But you've got to come to a place to know there are no exemptions. Life can be hard, and we must learn to keep our hand on the plow no matter what, and keep looking straight ahead.
Now, not every story ends the way we may want. How do we really learn to reconcile trusting God enough to realize this?
Yes, well, for me, I went back to reestablish my core values. I had to go back at that age, I'm 68 now, and go, who am I? What do I believe? What was I created for? Because there was a point in time that it was felt like it would be easier just could I just leave? Could I depart? And I think in a sense I did have choices to make. Now, so I had to reestablish my core values. What do I really believe? And there were these 3 things that have steered my life in the past, and I re-anchored as core values for my present and my future. 1, God is good no matter what, period. Number 2, that, ultimately all things work together for good for those who love God and been called to his purpose. 1, God is good, period. Number 2, all things work together for good. And number 3, because those 2 things are true, I came to a conclusion. Something good is about to happen.
So why do you advise cautioning other people from comparing their journey to someone else's?
That is so important. It's so important. One of the subtle tricks of the enemy is comparison contrast. Because if you compare your life to someone else's, you will go into what's called a downward spiral. Why me? Why them? Why me? And it's in the Song of Solomon, it talks about catching the little foxes that spoil the vine. And so I want people to know every sacrifice counts, every prayer matters. And folks, every little act of obedience on your part matters. And in rebuilding your life, it is one step at a time. It's one step at a time. I had no miracle breakthrough that all of a sudden my life was reconstructed. It was one decision followed by another decision, followed by an act of obedience, and walking in my core values. And I want you to know, God is good. All things work together for good. And only God can make something beautiful out of our mess.
So, James, how can we move forward to press through times of change and adjustment if we don't really know what lies ahead?
Well, isn't that what faith is all about? You see, the Psalms and Proverbs. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, it doesn't say in some of your ways. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will do what you can't. He will direct your steps. Now, we all lean one way or the other. The problem is we all, mankind, lean to our own rational understanding. How God can make a miracle out of our mess, we cannot understand. It's impossible to understand. I can tell you, I am no longer in debt. I can tell you, I have a great relationship with all four of my kids. I can tell you that all four of my kids have married well. I can tell you that my life is moving forward. I can tell you that God has used all of these circumstances to give me a message I never had before, to speak hope to other people, that your circumstances, as you bring them to him and you worship him, that something good is going to be shaped and made out of your life and give you a message that you have never had before.
Now, you write that God wants to heal us, but sometimes that healing does not come to us the way we want or expect. What is your message to those who are watching right now who don't receive earthly healing?
Mm-hmm. You know, I want you to know there are many forms of healing. I want you to know that Jesus does heal. I believe that comfort is a form of healing. I want you to know that eternity is the ultimate healing. I want you to know that God's love is the greatest healing. Listen, I am healed of cancer. I am. I have been free. I just had an oncology appointment just 2 days ago. I am now 9 years cancer free. And guess what? My late wife is cancer free, not on this side, but on the other side. So, what do I have to say? I call it the mystery and the majesty of God.
James, you believe we need to look at our situation from God's perspective to get a better understanding. And you even have an acronym, CARES, or CARES, when speaking about our Heavenly Father. Tell me more about that.
Yes, you see, we've got to cast our cares upon Him. We need to adore the Lord, and we are to magnify Him greater than our circumstances. And as then we bring then those supplications then to Him, having done those things, our problems are not near as big as we thought. And we can get a revelation that He really does care for us.
I love that. James Gall, author of Tell Your Heart to Sing Again. Thanks a lot for sharing your story and for joining us today from Nashville, Tennessee. On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.